I'm Drew Stevenson, and this is a lecture for my professional responsibility class about Model Rule 1.11, which addresses the special conflicts of interest that can arise for government officers and employees. And just to give my students the big picture before we dive in, we're really talking about the issues that arise when someone works for the government for a while as a lawyer often, or maybe even not as a lawyer in a non-legal job, but they work for the federal government or state government or local government, and then at some point they switch to being in private practice and practicing law for a firm. It can go in the other direction too. You can have someone who practices law for a while in the private sector and then has an opportunity to become a government lawyer. And there are special issues that get involved, especially if they're sort of involved in the same matter at their new job that they were involved with at their old job in the other sector. So let's dive in now. Rule 1.11a says that a lawyer who has formerly served as a public officer or employee of the government, number one, is subject to Rule 1.9c. You may remember that that's about using confidential information that you gleaned representing a previous client to that person's disadvantage in representing a new client. So you got confidential information about them and now you're using it against them. And number two, that lawyer shall not represent a client in connection with a matter in which the lawyer participated personally and substantially as a public officer or employee unless the appropriate government agency gives its informed consent confirmed in writing to the representation. So if your previous employer, the government agency, consents to it, then you can proceed. Now, the comments give a couple of examples. The first example is, let's say there's a lawyer who has pursued a claim on behalf of the government. That person may not then pursue the same claim on behalf of a later private client after the lawyer has left government service, except when authorized to do so by the government agency under paragraph A. So I'm going to give a couple of quick examples. Let's say you work for a government agency, either as a lawyer or it could be a non-lawyer, but you are working for an agency that's doing a legal investigation of someone for commercial fraud. Let's say they're running a Ponzi scheme or somehow defrauding investors or securities fraud. And then you leave and you are now a lawyer in the private sector. Well, some of the victims of that person's fraud, whoever was the target of the investigation, are likely to have private causes of action or claims against the person who defrauded them. And you can't go from representing the government in an enforcement action to representing the private parties who are seeking compensation over the same incident. Similarly, you could have a situation where you work for a government agency that does pollution enforcement and is going against someone who dumped a lot of toxic waste. Well, if you go to the private sector, a lot of the neighboring landowners may also have private causes of action against that polluter if the contamination migrated onto their properties. But you can't represent them or be involved in their cases if you also worked previously on the enforcement action for the government, unless the government agency that you worked for consents to that. So let's move on. The other example in the comments is a lawyer who has gone in the other direction. They pursued a claim on behalf of a private client. They may not pursue the claim on behalf of the government, except when authorized to do so by paragraph D, which we'll turn to in a moment. Okay, Rule 1.11b is about imputing the conflicts of interest to your whole firm that you work for in the private sector. So it says that if a lawyer is disqualified from representation under A, the disqualification applies to the lawyer's entire firm, unless that firm screens the lawyer. So unless a disqualified lawyer is timely screened from any participation in the matter and is apportioned no part of the fee therefrom, and written notice is promptly given to the appropriate government agency to enable it to ascertain compliance with the provisions of this rule. So this is going to look very similar to Rule 1.10. It's another rule about imputation and screening of disqualified lawyers, but it's tailored to the former government lawyer sort of context, where the former client is actually the government agency that you worked for, and they're the ones that would have to be given notice so that they can ascertain compliance with the screening requirement. Moving on to Rule 1.11c, if a lawyer has information that the lawyer knows is confidential government information about a person, and that information was acquired while the lawyer was a public officer or employee, the lawyer may not then represent a private client whose interests are adverse to that person in a matter in which the information could be used to the material disadvantage of the person. And so here we're not just talking about the same or substantially the same matter. It could be that when you worked for the government, you got a lot of confidential information about a person's, let's say offshore bank accounts and other assets that the public doesn't know about, but the government would be able to find out through, let's say, its subpoena powers or through mandatory reporting requirements and so forth. And so you know that not only does this apply to the same or substantially same matter, you can't represent a private sector client in any case where you could use that confidential information to the disadvantage of the person who, let's say, was the target of that investigation. Rule 1.11c continues, as used by this rule, the term confidential government information means information that has been obtained under governmental authority and which the government is either prohibited by law from disclosing to the public or has a legal privilege not to disclose, and which is not otherwise available to the public. So obviously some information is going to be publicly known or would be easily discoverable by the public. But if the government has the information because they're the government, and so they, for example, can go through the police investigation files or an agency's investigation, even if they didn't bring an enforcement action and so forth. So that would be confidential information that's not really available to the outside. And there are going to be relevant laws that prohibit leaks of information that the government has, or that give the government basically a type of privilege that they could assert to refuse to disclose certain information. And then Rule 1.11 adds, a firm with which that lawyer is associated may undertake or continue representation in the matter only if the disqualified lawyer is timely screened from any participation in the matter and is apportioned no part of the fee therefrom. So if we screen the lawyer, now you'll still get your regular salary and stuff, but if there's a let's say a huge windfall from this case for your firm, in some way they're going to have to make sure that you don't get a share or of that or a special bonus or any part of a contingent fee. The comments note that paragraph C operates when the lawyer in question has knowledge of information only, and that means actual knowledge. It doesn't operate with respect to information that merely could be imputed to the lawyer. So under 1.9, you may remember, we did make a lot of inferences or presumptions about what confidential information a lawyer might have, even if the lawyer is kind of denying it. Here, we really need to have some evidence that the lawyer has actual knowledge. So this is kind of one difference between 1.11c and the provisions of 1.9. Okay, moving on to 1.11d. I promise we're almost done. Except as law may otherwise expressly permit, a lawyer currently serving as a public officer or employee is subject to Rules 1.7 and 1.9. So just the fact that you work for the government doesn't mean that you're above the ethics rules so that you don't have to follow them. If you're a lawyer for the government, you're still a lawyer. And so that means if you have a personal conflict of interest, let's say because of your personal financial stake in a company or a family member who's the target of an investigation or something like that, that's a material limitation under 1.7, and it applies to you. And the same is true with 1.9, which mostly focuses on conflicts of interest with former clients and the misuse of confidential information. 1.11d continues with subsection 2.1. A lawyer currently serving as a public officer or employee shall not participate in a matter in which the lawyer participated personally and substantially while in private practice, or non-governmental employment. We already saw this in an earlier example, unless the appropriate government agency gives its informed consent confirmed in writing. So note that here we're not looking necessarily for the private sector former client's consent. The agency has to be notified and give consent to this as well. And you'll notice that throughout this rule, it talks about the lawyer participating in matters personally and substantially. And I'm going to give a quick example. When I was in government practice for a state agency, representing a state agency, there was a particular assignment I was given for a pretty big case, but I was asked just to write a very simple short research memo about a forum selection and venue. I had no access to facts of the case. I didn't participate in discovery or investigation of the matter or have court appearances or anything like that. I was given this very sort of a small assignment that you could probably have given to a law student intern to research more forum and venue selection for that type of claim generally. So that's not substantially participating in a matter. So 1.11 wouldn't apply if you were only involved very incidentally. So you were present for a meeting where a case was mentioned, but you don't really have confidential information about it, or you weren't really involved, or you were asked to write a legal memo about a topic, like I said, forum or selection or venue or something like that, and jurisdiction, standing, and so forth. But you really weren't involved in anything that gave you information about the facts of the case. Rule 1.11d2 continues, a lawyer currently serving as a public officer or employee shall not negotiate for private employment with any person who is involved as a party or as a lawyer for a party in a matter in which the lawyer is participating personally and substantially. We saw something very similar when we talked about Model Rule 1.7. And so the concern here is that, let's say you work for a regulatory agency that's doing compliance enforcement, or asking for information from the regulated industry. You can't simultaneously be trying to get a job with the company that's under investigation or the law firm that's representing them. If you're involved in the matter, that would present a conflict of interest. We do have an exception under 1.11 for judicial clerks, and the reason is that there's a special provision of the next rule, Rule 1.12, about how we handle lawyers who are doing a judicial clerkship, which is typically right after law school. Most judicial clerkships are only for a year or two, and so obviously the person is going to, a lot of judicial clerks are looking for while they're a clerk, are trying to get a job for after their clerkship ends. And we'll have a special rule about that. Keep in mind that sometimes lawyers move laterally within the government. So somebody may go from a city attorney's office to the state's attorney's office, or from a state government agency to the federal government, or even move from one federal agency to another. When a lawyer has been employed by one government agency and then moves to a second government agency, it may be appropriate to treat the second agency as another client for purposes of this rule. That's from the comments. And the example they give is a lawyer who's employed by a city and subsequently is employed by a federal agency. And note that the latter agency is not required to screen the lawyer in the same way that a private sector law firm would need to do. Rule 1.11e is just a definition. As used in this rule, a matter includes any judicial or other proceeding, application, request for a ruling or other determination, contract, claim, controversy, investigation, charge, accusation, arrest, or other particular matter involving a specific party or parties, and to any other matter covered by the conflict of interest rules of the appropriate government agency. So just to clarify, this doesn't have to have been a case that went to court. It could have just been an investigation. And in fact, it doesn't even have to have been something adversarial. Sometimes it's a request for information or processing. Let's say someone is applying for a permit or license and with a certain government entity to do something, and you were working at the entity and were involved with the processing of that license application or permit application and so forth. That would still count, even though there was no like legal dispute. So Rule 1.11, it could still be the substantially related matter. If, let's say, the person was applying for a permit or application and they had to disclose or supply a lot of information to the agency, and you were involved with that, and later on there's you're trying to represent that same party, defending them against an enforcement action for violating the terms or conditions of their license or permit. And number two is basically just a reminder that lots of agencies will, on top of the model rules, will also have some of their own conflicts of interest rules, and you're obligated to follow those as well. So the fact that you're a lawyer doesn't mean that you only follow the ethical rules about lawyers. If your agency has other rules about keeping information confidential or not accepting gifts from private parties and so on, you're going to be bound by those as well. And that concludes our lecture about Rule 1.11.